The following is a production of the Dallas Genealogical Society. For more information, please visit our website at dallasgenealogy.org.
Okay, thank you. Welcome, everybody. Barbara talked about doing the work on this side of the pond to sort of find where your folks came from. And now I'll be talking about doing the work on the other side of the pond once you get across. And I titled this, It Depends, which is the standard answer to any genealogical question you may ever ask of any genealogist, because it depends on things like political, social, and cultural changes in terms of what's going to happen. And I want to point out you can do it. It will work. I mentioned in the introduction, this is the marriage of my eighth great Meisner grandparents in the little town in Bavaria of Obereuderheim in 1654. There you see the actual record written mostly in German. We threw in just a little bit of Latin here to say it was married in the church, and that's the key that they were Catholic, because otherwise you would expect that at this time that Catholic records would be all in Latin, but this one, in fact, is in German. I've got the translation here, did the transcription translation with help from artificial intelligence. And in 2 weeks, our Dallas Genealogical Society will be hosting a presentation on artificial intelligence. Notice that you had the village mayor of Durfeld was one of the sponsors, which is also a key of, oh, he must have been semi-important. And you'll see this Bert Durfeld pop up again. So time and place, always important in genealogy, and no matter where you're searching. And you really, I want to say, you got to spend as much time and energy studying the time and place before you go searching for names and records and those sorts of things. Now, when I was in school, history never really interested me that much. I was a science and math geek, but in doing all my genealogy, I've learned that yes, you really have to pay attention to the history, the time and place, because you're going to be looking for a haystack and a needle in a haystack. And first you got to find the right haystack is the key, because so many of the records, not in Germany, but many parts of Europe, are kept locally rather than any central repository. So you have to be able to trace back. So what you want to do, you want to review German history, pay attention to the shifting boundaries, what is, was, were Germany. Make sure you got the right person. Names changed. Barbara mentioned a little bit replacement children. If one child dies as an infant, they may reuse the name for the next one of the same sex. Spelling is always optional in genealogy. And you'll find in many cases there's more than one town with the same name. So you want to use finding aids to try to figure out where both the civil and the church records might be located. And there are lots of online resources to help you with correspondence, whether you're writing the old pen and paper or typewriter way, or doing email, doing Facebook, whatever, and also reading, interpreting the printing, which will be strange looking in the beginning, and the handwriting. So, did your ancestors live in Germany? Well, it depends. What's Germany? Barbara mentioned Germany sort of started as a empire in 1871, but actually Germany as we know it today is really a remnant after World War II and then the unification in 1990. So we start in about 962 with the Holy Roman Empire, which was never Holy Roman or an empire. Many, 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 many small states, independent principalities. After the 30 Years' War, 1618 to 1648, which took out about a third of the population, even more in other parts, Germany was sitting there in the middle of Europe with France and the Netherlands on one side, and you had the Russians and the Austrians on the other side, and they were marching back and forth and leaving their DNA as they went. As the traders did the same thing. But now we're starting to see Austria, Prussia, Bavaria, and Saxony as separate countries, if you will, kingdoms. gaining more. Poland was sort of cut up between 1772 and 1795 to the point it did not exist for quite a long time. Lithuania as well. In the case of Prussia, Frederick II was wanted Germans to move over into that area, which was primarily rural and populated. And here you can see a map. We're zooming in on what is now Poland. And you can see there were three different times when Russia, in sort of the pink colors, Austria in the green, and then Prussia in the blues were all eating up chunks of it. And you may wonder about this little white part in the middle. That was the original duchy of Prussia. So it was Prussia before anything else was. And that's why it was already part of Prussia. But they sort of cut it up. And then now, of course, Poland is back again. But they put a lot of German speaking people there. And then a lot of them later on will have moved out. Napoleon plays a very important role as well around the year 1800 when he came in, particularly if you're in Western Germany along the Rhine River. One of the things they did what was called the Imperial Recess and cut up and merged a lot of these imperial states into more consolidated areas. So little every bishop and margrave and Dutch he was now started to be consolidated. Now, because most of the records are local and they're going to look a lot at church records, particularly in March with the seminar, those were always in that place. So it didn't necessarily matter who was the ruler at the time. But as a result of that, in 1803, we're seeing Baden, Württemberg, Bavaria, Saxony, and Prussia all became larger. They also have independent cities, and there's still a couple left, and they were separate from any area around them. They're sort of, well, it's, Washington, D.C., except Congress sticks their thumb into Washington, D.C. a lot. It's not quite the same, but these were cities that were essentially their own little kingdom, if you will. The Vienna Peace Conference, 1814 to 1815, Prussia started to become a very large state as a loose federation of about 38 individual things. 1871, we have the German Empire, and that's now 4 kingdoms, 6 grand duchies, 5 duchies. What makes a duchy grand? Only if they want to call it, otherwise there's no difference. 7 principalities, 3 Hanseatic cities, and 1 imperial territory. But they're sort of kind of unified as the German Empire. Obviously, after World War I and then World War II, then what is now Germany has shrunk back from what Prussia and that first empire was. So again, the importance of time and place. The Saarland down there in southwest Germany, France finally gave it back for the last time just in 1957. It's the smallest of the current German states. We have the reunification of East and West Germany. After World War II, East Germany sort of abolished states, and then they were reestablished in 1990 after they were reunited with what is now Germany. So there were states, and then there weren't states, and then there were states again. So you got to pay attention to the time and place. So here's our Holy Roman Empire in 1789. And boy, if you live in the central part of Germany, who do you owe allegiance to? And Warren Bittner, one of my German instructors for courses I took, mentioned that he came across one case of 3 towns and 1 village, and each house in that village, the 3 houses, each owes allegiance to a different prince right there on the same street. But again, the records are kept locally. So who is in charge? That made the rules of dependence, but the records didn't really change that much. So we get into the German Confederation after Napoleon's defeat, and we see particularly up there in the north, Prussia is getting a lot bigger. We see there's my Germans from Bavaria, and notice this little part was part of Bavaria at the time. They've given it back since. Here we have Austria, and then of course we have Poland, Hungary, as well, and then France over there on the west. Then in 1871, we get the German Reich, which is all this stuff in blue. And then by about 1876, things like Bavaria and Württemberg, Baden sort of joined as well. So again, you have to pay attention to time and place on what laws were in effect. And we'll mention this a little bit in terms of the marriage laws. Then we have the territorial losses after World War I, which are primarily those in the yellow, and we're starting to see Poland is coming back. North Schleswig goes back to Denmark. We have the Alsace-Lorraine in France. This part's always been trading back and forth, and you go over there now, and it looks as German as the places just across the river. And then after World War II, then a lot more was given back as well. Uh, and as a result, a lot of the Germans who had been living there decided to go back to Germany. In 1945, Germany was not a place to go back to, but they were sort of left that area. And from Czechoslovakia, another 3 million German speaking people left. And then the question was, did they leave the records behind? In most cases, yes, but it depends. And this particular case, they established a registry office in Berlin in 1945 to accumulate all those civil registrations. It started about 1874. For a lot of money, you can buy them from the registry office, or if you can get to a library that has an ancestry subscription or you have your own, there you can find those records. So this is one where it depends. No, the records are not there in the locality. They've been pulled back to Germany. And finally, we get the East and West Germany, officially the Federal Republic of Germany, 1952 with the capital in Bonn, and the German Democratic Republic with its capital in East Berlin. And you notice I've sort of fainted out the names of the states because at that time, East Germany says, no, we don't have states, where in West Germany they did. And in 1952, they also merged Baden, Württemberg, Baden, and Württemberg Hohenzollern into Baden-Württemberg as just one state. And then, as I mentioned, 1957, the Saarland was finally given back again after the war. France gave it back, and it's the smallest of the current German states. So now we had East and West Germany in sort of most of our lifetimes. And then we have the unification. So now it is the Federal Republic of Germany from 1990 on, and those are the states. And we sort of mentioned there's Saxony, the state, and then Saxony-Anhalt and Lower Saxony. So you again have to pay attention. Just if they just tell you Saxony, you sort of hope maybe it was the state, the former kingdom, but maybe they now mean one of the others. So there's those 16 area states, similar to what we may think of as Texas, Oklahoma, Louisiana. But then there's Berlin and Hamburg, which are city states. They have their own government separate from the state that surrounds them. And then we have even a little more special case of Bremen and Bremerhaven, because it's not contiguous. There's the city of Bremen, but then the port part of Bremerhaven, those two are under one jurisdiction. Bremerhaven is very important. Of course, that's the port where a lot of people left from. They did actually leave from Bremen because you couldn't get the boats all the way upriver to Bremen. So the port was Bremerhaven. So what social changes may have impacted your ancestors? Well, it'll depend. We have Martin Luther translating the Bible and using what was a small dialect of German at the time as what the language he used. In most cases, that was the one book people had. If they had a book in their house, it was the Bible. And now that's the German that most people speak and write. So it comes from Martin Luther and his translation of the Bible. In 1648, again after the 30 Years' War. Again, 1500s, Luther already started Lutheranism as a break from Catholicism. Now they said, well, each prince can determine the religion of his state, and the main choices were you could be Catholic, Lutheran, or Calvinistic. And there were, to a greater or lesser extent, how much they tolerated the others. In some cases, if you weren't the religion of the priest, they might let you willingly leave. Other cases where you sort of had to suck it up. Surnames. Bauden in 1790 says, okay, everybody's got to have a surname, and it's the one you pass down from one generation to the next. So if you're getting back into older records, you have to pay a little bit more attention to surnames. Is that your family? They have different surnames? Well, maybe it's spelled differently, whatever. Prussia did in 1812, Bavaria and Mecklenburg shortly afterwards. Then we have the Industrial Revolution, changed Germany from a rural agricultural country to an urban one. It sort of started in the southwest, along the Rhine River Valley in that area, and then gradually moved up into the northeast. In 1800, about 80% of the German population were farmers in the countryside. About 100 years later, now most of them are in towns and cities. You're going to find your families may have moved. And why did they move? Because of the Industrial Revolution. The jobs they had as craftsmen in their village no longer were economically viable. They had to move into the city to work in a factory. And now there's a lot more towns growing in size. Spelling. Well, we talked about spelling of names is always variable in genealogy, but even German, the official spelling of what the word should be spelled like starts in about 1880 with Conrad Duden. What about cultural changes? Well, again, it's going to depend, time and place. Germany, of course, being in Europe, had a very long history of feudalism, and there's sort of echoes of it still around today. The process to eliminate serfdom was gradual and uneven. Prussia abolished it in the early 19th century. They were a little bit more progressive. In the southern parts of what is now Germany, they were a little bit more conservative. Bavaria didn't completely get away with it till about the 1840s or so. When you got rid of serfdom, then serfs had a legal status, but now they sort of got upgraded and now they could own land. Maybe a 2/3 or a half of the land they'd been working on that before all belonged to the Lord, and now they could own the land. Could they afford to keep it was a question. They didn't have to provide services to the Lord, either go work in the castle or do the herding, the hunting, the tending of his fields. And you didn't have to pay taxes, which in most cases would be the crops from your field, or if you're a barrel maker, some of the barrels you made had to go to the Lord. You could leave. Before, you had to get permission from the Lord to leave. You could marry without the Lord's permission. Before then, you couldn't. So you may find, well, why didn't my folks get married? Well, they didn't have permission to do it. Social standing is one of those things that sort of is still carried on even from feudalism. That you'll see the German word Stand, S-T-A-N-D, and lots of times you'll see it's translated, well, that's their occupation. Well, it's more than that, and it's part of your identity. It defined your rights and your obligations, what you could do and what you couldn't do before the 1900s. The idea is God put you where you were, and that's where you were supposed to be, and that's where you should stay. And not this, oh, you could grow up someday to be the king. No, you had to be royalty to do that. If you were a baker, your children were expected to be bakers. They would probably marry a daughter of another baker. But of course, bakers have to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning, and that's the kind of woman you'd probably want to marry as well, not one that wants to sleep in. So upward mobility, largely impossible. You have to marry within your class, particularly the men, and you really, again, couldn't really move up. Again, Warren Bittner, one of my instructors, had an ancestor. He talked about the one guy, he was the son of the executioner, and he wanted to marry the daughter of a farmer. And they actually put both of them in prison so that they couldn't marry each other because they were not the same social class. Another cultural concept is legitimacy. Were your parents married when you were born, or did they get married at least afterwards? There was a question that you had, again, because you didn't have much of a way of a really overarching central government, the town or the village had to take care of the widows, the orphans, the indigent, and the like. And they didn't really want to have too many of them. So they said you had to get permission to get married and passed a lot of laws. You had to show that you could support your wife. If you were a man, you had to have completed your military duty because at that time you'd go off fight in the war and get killed or come back injured and maimed, and you couldn't support the family. And then who's going to have to do it? The village. So often it was the city councils that could decide who could get married and if you could live in the town. When you move into a town, you had to register with the police. You had to get permission to do that. So you may find lots of cases that your ancestors weren't getting married because they didn't get permission to do so. And the councils wanted the right people getting married, having kids, and living in their town. Sound familiar? Does history repeat itself? They were cautious about newcomers coming in. If you already had two barrel makers in the village, you didn't want any more barrel makers coming in. So you better go somewhere else. And if the son of a barrel maker now grows up and he wants to start his own business, well, until his dad dies or inherits, he may have to move to another town because we already got two barrel makers in our village. And if you live in the village, you better be buying your barrels from one of those two barrel makers. In 1870, about 10 to 12% of all births in Germany were illegitimate, meaning the parents weren't married, but again, maybe because they couldn't get married. All these laws, they thought if we don't let them get married, then they won't have kids, right? Ha! There's no reason why people who aren't married can't have children. The children would become legitimate once their parents were married. And I'll be showing you an example of that. So now we'll ask, were your ancestors recorded in church registers or civil registers when we find them in records? Well, it depends. Barbara talked a little bit about Mars Gazetteria. Every place in the German Empire published in about 1912 includes the location of the civil registry office and the Catholic and Lutheran church parishes and any Jewish synagogue. So if you have that town, you have the name of it you found from doing your work on this side of the pond. Now you can figure out where are the records going to be? Where's the registry office? Where's the parish? Where's the synagogue? Barbara showed a little bit about this. The links are in my segment of the syllabus. I want to give particular notice to Marion Rainey. She was a volunteer at the Family Search Library, spent 20 years making sure this got online. Nowadays, everybody says, oh yeah, we got MySCAS online, just go right there. Well, there's 20 years of Marion's work because it's there. And then she got a computer volunteer, Brad Coleman, to help as well. So my Meisters came from the little village of Pusselsheim. And originally, I had to go back and you had to look at this sort of printing in the book with all its little abbreviations and its own little terms and the like. And I used to do a 1-hour lecture just on how do you figure all this out. You don't have to do that anymore. Thank you, Marion. Again, there you can see the map, and then you see some of the stuff still sort of in German, but you scroll down And it shows you there's level one, they're in Bavaria. The region is the Unterfranken. Uh, the district office is Gerolzhofen. The local court, that's where you're going to find a lot of the records where people are suing, probate records, those sorts of things. That's why you want to pay attention to it. Standesamt is the name of the civil registration office. That's where the civil registers will be once you get those. And then it will also list if there are any Catholic, Protestant, or churches or synagogues. In the case of Pusselsheim, it has one Catholic church. So that's where I would look for the church records. Also on Mars, you can go and say, I want to see an ecclesiastical map. And this is where Brad Coleman helped out. And they went and sort of mapped out and say, well, what if they were Protestant? Well, we can see there's Pusselsheim and it has a Catholic parish. And then Durfield, remember Durfield, the mayor Durfield was a witness at my eighth great grandparents' marriage, and it has a church. That means the priest lived in Pusselsheim, but they had a church that he would go there maybe every other week to offer services. But the records are most likely the physical book in Pusselsheim. Did he keep a separate book for Durfield? Maybe, maybe not. Things you want to pay attention for. And in this case, in Bavaria, which was very Catholic, you have to scroll down. If you look, I sort of add in, if you went about 4 miles away, you could get to Bimbach, where they did have a Protestant parish. You can also pick the map option, and there you can see an old time, or you can toggle a current map. And I've clicked to show the Catholic parishes. That's all the yellows. And there's Pusselsheim in red, and there's a yellow bubble behind it. And then the Protestants are the P's, and Bimbach is over here. That's about 4 miles away. And there's also one over here about 4 miles away as well. So maybe they didn't bother even if they were evangelical, which was the combined Lutheran and Calvinist that the Prussian prince decided should be combined. Maybe it was just easier to go to the Catholic Church to get the kid baptized. Be alert for common town names. We are so excited. We just built a new grist mill in our area, and we're going to call the town New Mill, New Mill. There are 347 new mills. So you want to zoom in a bit before you're going to try to find that one. We mentioned Compton as well. They have a historic gazetteer. It lists not only Germany, but Europe, North America, even Australia, alternate formal names, historic affiliations as well. You can go to, it's also called GenWiki. Again, you have the links in the syllabus. There you can see the map, all the areas they cover. So it's a lot more than just Germany or the parts that were German speaking, like Austria, Switzerland, and those even went over into Russia. So I put in Pusselsheim again, and there it goes and shows me the entry for it. There's the maps, shows me it's a village. They redid what their equivalent of zip codes were in 1993, if you want to write to the locality. And down here at the bottom, these superordinate objects, you can go down, scroll down to see it, and it tells you who did they belong to. And I've done the translations for you. Here's Pusselsheim. It's a church village. That's where you'll find, we saw it from Myers Gazetteer, the parish register, baptisms, marriage, and burials, and the civil registration starting in Bavaria, 1876. Pusselsheim belonged to Donnersdorf, and then it was in the Municipal Association of Gerolzhofen. That's where the local district court was for the marriage contracts, permission papers, and the like. And then you work up to, it was in the region of the Unterfranken. It was a free state. It was originally then the Deutscher Bund in 1815. Then it became part of the German Reich in 1871. It was then part of the German state in 1946. It was in the American zone after the war and then became part of Germany and part of the United Nations and the European Union. But the lower parts where you're looking for where might the court be, or if you look at the churches, which diocese may it have been in. Meisner, again, if you're looking areas east of the Oder and Nisa River, which would include parts that are now Poland and Lithuania and the like, this gazetteer will tell you the registry office and again the Catholic Lutheran parishes if they had them. This is what the website looks like. Again, the link is in your syllabus. I can't put in Püsselsheim because that's not the area. You can scroll down, it'll tell you how you can search the German name, the old German name, the Polish name, the Russian name, the Lithuanian name, and the like. You can use wildcards and it will tell you how to do that, to do the search. And note at the bottom, more information doesn't necessarily make it better. When you're doing searching, start out simple and then add in more details. It also has a dictionary, which will help you with words. I like Mayor, sort of my pfeffer, someone who pays his taxes in pepper. Not he's a pepper, she's a pepper, I'm a pepper too. Not those kind of peppers. No, the pepper plants. But that's how you would have paid your taxes to the Lord. And that's how you got your name. So I put in Freienwalde. There's the Polish and Russian name, it tells me. It was in what the German province was called Pomerania. Now there's today's province. It tells me the Lutheran parish as of 1905 was in that village. The Catholic parish was in the neighboring town in 1905. And the Civil Registry Office as of 1905 was there in the town. And the population was about 2,500 people. I can go to the free city state of Danzig, which was around a bit longer. In 1299, it was Bergum Danzig, works its way up through those. It was part of West Prussia when it was in Germany, and now it's in Pomorski. The Lutheran parish, the Catholic parish, and the registry office have all been in Danzig. Again, it was a city state. And notice that it has over 2,500 Jewish faith in 1905. And most likely that means there's was also be a synagogue or two. There are other gazetteers. A lot of the information from the Kartenmeister came from the Municipal Gazetteer of the Kingdom of Prussia. That's online as well. There's a Jewish Gen Gazetteer, over 4 million localities, Europe and beyond. And there are regional gazetteers. And again, if you look in the syllabus, I have links for online German gazetteers and parish register inventories. It will be mentioned a couple times in Family Search the Wiki. Will you find your ancestors in church registers? And again, Michael's going to talk a lot about that in March. We are recording these, so you have these sessions available until that time, and then his will be recorded as well. So if your head's spinning right now, again, you got 2 months to work on this. Church registers have baptisms and burials, not births and deaths, as well as marriages. Roger Meinhardt, you've heard that name before. At least 85% of the German church records ever written exist today, somewhere, somehow, not necessarily online, maybe in the locality, maybe in a diocesan or regional archive. Your job will be to find them and do your homework, and there's lots of ways to do that. And again, the wikis are a good place. Again, always look for that locality. Before 1876, most Germans you'll find record in church records primarily. The Lutherans began their records in 1540. The Catholics started baptisms and marriages in the mid 1550s and added burial records in 1614. So most of the research you're doing, you will find they were in those records. And the Reformed Calvinistics began again 1650. So the records are out there. Most are still maintained by the parish. When I wrote to Pusselsheim, they came back. It took them about 9 months to reply because they don't have a priest there anymore, just a volunteer. And she said, well, I got the records from 1948 on. Before that, they're in the diocese. Some older church records, and in some cases, the civil government wanted records and asked the churches to make a duplicate copy of their records. Family Search Catalog will be a good place to start first. Then you can look at Matricula for the free. It's free and has Catholic registers. And there's a paid site called Archeon for the Lutheran and Reformed. You only need to buy not a subscription, it's a pass for 1 month, 3 months, a year, whatever, to see the actual records. You can search the site to see if they have the records. And again, Michael's going to deal a lot more with this at the end of March in the seminar. The records may be in German or Latin or French. The parish may have kept separate books for the affiliated villages. Like I say, Pusselsheim, did they keep a separate book for Durfield, or is it combined into one? And again, not all the books survived, but if there was a duplicate, maybe the duplicate survived. Parish boundaries do change over time. Pusselsheim only had a church starting in 1803. Before that, it was an affiliate of that Obereuerheim. And that's where the records would end up. You have to research the history, and you can do that. Records originally were written in paragraph form. You saw that with that marriage record, others in columnar format, and in some cases, even the church records had pre-printed forms. Will you find your ancestors in civil registers? It depends. Civil registers will have births and deaths, not baptisms and burials. Covers about 98% of the population starting from about 1876. Kept by a civil register at the office called a Standesamt. The older records may have got transferred up to the next archive. The French with Napoleon, he liked records. So around the Rhine River Valley, there are records that go back starting in 1795 up to about 1815. Then Napoleon was defeated and Prussia took back that area. And in some cases, they said, well, that's it, we're stopping the records. Others said, well, if that was a good idea, maybe we'll sort of keep them. So you have to do your research on that location. Areas east of the Rhine River generally stopped the silver registration records. They had started in 1795 after or earlier by about 1850. West kept doing it. It was part of France. You find those records looking in the French archives. And guess what? They're in French. Here you can see a map. Again, found this online from Wikipedia, another little neat place to look. And you have places west of the Rhine River, like here also is Lorraine, started their civil registration in 1792, and they're still doing it today. East of the Rhine record, we get down even to Oldenburg up here, started in 1811 and then quit in 1815. But if you had ancestors then, in addition to church records, you could look for some civil registration records. Then we have 1874, Prussia grows, and then 1876 picks up those parts in purple, including there in Bavaria. And now we have silver registration for all that area. And that's where if 98% of the people living after 1876 were in those registers. It mandated civil marriage. You want to get married in a church? Sure, great, wonderful. You want to be legally married, you have to go to the registry office and have a record and a marriage in the civil registry. And that's still true today. You have to have a civil marriage. And you have to get baptized. You'll still have a birth record, but the church records are becoming a little more optional. What will you find in the civil birth record? The name of the child, the date and place of their birth, and when they were registered, the name of the parents, including mother's maiden name, occupations, that's Stand. We care about who you are and where you live, and if it's in a town, it'll have the actual address. And often the informant's name, maybe it's the midwife. Marriage records will have the name, occupation, birth dates, birthplaces of the bride and the groom, their ages, their marital status, their religion, the parents' names, and the witnesses' names. Death records will have the name of the deceased, their occupation, their marital status, date and place of death and registration, age, birthplace, if the people knew it in the place where he died, the name of the informant, often maybe a relative or maybe it's a hospital official. These are what these records look like. They're pre-printed forms. At the top, you look for an A or B or a C. An A is a birth. Here you can see it's a fill in the blanks. Before the undersigned registrar, the following appeared today, residing in of what religion? How do I know it's that person? What child was born, when and where? What was the names? So here we see the case of an unmarried parlor maid, 1877. It's an illegitimate child. Ugen Kurt, the midwife, is reporting it, and it's registered there in Dresden. But notice then the registrar has added this note on the right. And 9 years later, he's writing in and saying, well, guess what? The child's been legitimized because the parents got married in 1878. The father is the locksmith, always that who you are, Carl Emil Martinschink, and the mother, the child. They got married in 1878, but until 1886, they documented the fact the son was legitimized. So something must have happened to why he had to show he was legitimized. Legally, as soon as they got married, he was. But again, the value of these records. B would be a marriage record. It's 2 pages long. Always look at both pages. Fill in the blank. Here's everything about the groom, his religion, who he is. He's a driver, his parents. The father was a baker where the parents live. There's the bride, all her information. And then note at the bottom, the husband died in 1922. And here's where you could find the death certificate. C would be that death registry. And again, fill in the blank. It's the bricklayer's wife is pointing out, oh no, her 2-year-old daughter has died. And there's the father's name as well. He's the bricklayer. Where the child died, yes, she was there. They would always read out this stuff and the person reported then signed their name. And again, a marginal note saying, oh, we spelled the name wrong. It's not Vita with an E, it's Vit. And the mother was not Mina Emma Amelia. Notice she has multiple forenames. She's Emma Amelia Mina. So lots of good information in those. Can you access those records? There's a lot of privacy involved in Germany, more so than here. So the more recent records, you do not get access to them unless you are a son or daughter. What will the language be? Well, again, it depends. It may be German, maybe French, maybe Danish, maybe Polish. Lutheran registers were generally written in German. Older Catholics were in Latin, and then later on they became German. Parts of Poland would be now in Russian or German or Latin in the older records. What about names? Forenames. Often you'll see the first name was Johann after John the Baptist, or Joseph or St. Joseph or Jacob. And the spiritual name for a girl may be Anna or Maria. Then you have a second foreign name. There are no middle names. You just have lots of forenames, 1, 2, 3, 4. That might be the name of a close friend. Often that's the name they were called by. And you may see that in the church registers underlined. And that's where you're going to find a lot of the records. They may have additional forenames. So you want to look both for their first name, first forename, and their call name. So here's a case of a register. The bottom one is one of my Bernard Meisners. There's the name of the child, written in language we can read, and then all the rest of it's in the German script. Here's the name of the godparents. So let's mash them together, and we see Barbara Elizabeth. Her godmother was Elizabeth. Here's Johann Georg, and his godfather was Johann Georg. Where do you think they're getting the name of these kids? Here's Anna Margarita. Her godmother was Anna Margarita. Notice the little cross points out that she died in 1846, the same year she was born and baptized. Anna Katarina's grandmother was Katarina. Eva, her godmother's name was Eva, and Eva also died 1848. And then there's my Bernard. The columns over here are for the name of the father and his occupation. They weren't allowed to get married in 1846. You always want to ask for the full page, not just an extract, because here's a little note that said Bernard left with his mother, Barbara Schenk, for North America. This is March of 1846, July 1846. All three of them come down the gangplank in New York using the name Meisner. So they just couldn't get married in Germany. You may find forenames with the naming convention often common. The first son is named after the father's father, the second son, the mother's father. This is true through lots of parts of Europe. First daughter may be the mother's mother, the second daughter, the father's mother, and so on. Lutherans at one point said only the saints and angels in the Bible. So you wouldn't get a Bernard. He's not in the Bible. Replacement children, we've talked a little bit about. A child may have been given the name as a previous child who dies as an infant. So be careful for that as you're looking around. Always look for years before and after. What about that Johann versus Johannes? Well, Johann is that spiritual name, not the call name. We have Johann Sebastian Bach, his brother Johann Christoph Bach, their brother Johann Jakob Bach, their father Johann Ambrosius Bach, and his brother, the boy's uncle, Johann Christoph Bach. I always wonder if Mrs. Bach would have called him for dinner and just said, Johann's, supper time. None of them went by Johann. Goethe was Johann Wolfgang Bach. On the other hand, if you're a Johannes, you probably were Johannes. There's Johannes Brahms. Father was Johann Jakob, mother was Johanna Henrika Christiane. Gutenberg was Johannes Gensfleisch. The house they lived in had a great view of the mountains. It was called Gutenberg, and that's what he picked then as his surname. And Kepler, the astronomer, was the Johannes. So those were Johannes's. Surnames, hereditary surnames were used early on. Descends from an occupation, a geography, or physical characteristic. There's a town in East Germany, eastern part of Germany called Meissen. Guess where we get our name from? Patronymic names are you're named after your parent. Started in Northeast Germany in particular to about 1820. There were also farm names. It wasn't the name of the owner of the farm necessarily, but the person who was the original farmer of the land. And then if that farmer didn't leave any male descendants, but had a daughter who inherited the farm, the man who married her would often take that surname. Those are the locations where you would mostly find it. And you'll see little terms like modo, voco, gnat, also known as essentially. And the kids may have picked up that name as well. And then Napoleon said, no, we're not doing that anymore. What about local family history books? Our German genealogy SIG, part of the Dallas Genealogical Society. I call your attention, and you've got links and even more details in the syllabus. We had a presentation in November about these family history books by a representative from the St. Louis County Library. All our presentations have been hybrid. You can find in many cases the handouts and recordings as another resource for this information. Or some books are town genealogies. Start with church records and may go up to about 1900. Birth, marriage, death date is compiled into families for all the persons in the local records. May include sources as parish registers, civil registration, all sorts of other kinds of information for a town. It's in a standard format. Often you can find the surname and then the marriage dates. There's quite a number online, and Compkin has them, and you have the links in the syllabus. The St. Louis Library, again, you can look at her presentation. They will do lookups for you. There you can see the online through Compkin, Genealogy Net, and even places like the Germans that went over to the Black Sea in Russia. And then you can see on the right here what the library has. And here you can go in and see the Ortsimphon books on Compkin, also known as Genealogy Net. You go to Databanks, Ortsfamilien Books, and you pull up, and oh, it's in German. What am I going to do? See the little button that says English? You go to that. There you can see this is Hochfranken. 7,000 persons in this data bank in Upper Franconia. 20 years of family research by the author. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, if that's your relatives. They don't have Meisners, they have a Johannes Meisner. And this is sort of a standard format, and you got the symbols. So you can see that he's a male, and when he was born, and when he died. And he was born, and then look how they do their dates, the 5th of September, 1671. He died on the 9th of November, 1728. The sources are the KBs, the Kirchenbuchers. You want to look at the church books. It will then talk about his families. There's his wife, where and when she was born, the little double circles, when they got married, 21st November, 1676. Their child, Johannes Meisner, his parents, Johannes and Barbara Wirth, and his siblings. And then you can just work this through and create a family tree. So here's that Johannes Meisner and Barbara Wirth. They had the son Johannes. He married a Margarita, who was the daughter of Hans Friedrich and Margarita. This Johannes and Margarita had a son they called Johannes. He married a woman called Margarita. They had a son, Johannes. He married a woman called Margarita. They had a son, oh good, Johann Nicol. But this will help you keep track of which Johannes are you dealing with. In what date was your ancestor born, married, or buried? It depends. What calendar did they use? Were they using the Julian calendar, 1685? Pope Gregory said, new calendar, we got to fix up Easter. The Protestants said, that's the Catholic calendar. We're not using that. We're going to keep with the Julian calendar. And if you're using the Catholic calendar, then we say, well, yeah, it was really the second Sunday after Easter. You're saying, well, which date was that? They used the liturgical calendar. Were they over there with those French records? They had the French Republican calendar around the year 1800. Were they using the Hebrew calendar? Well, you have to pay attention to that. And again, our German genealogy SIGs, I did a presentation a year and a half ago, 2 years ago now on that. And that's all available to you freely online. We do encourage you to join the Dallas Society as well. And of course, you get discounts on things like the seminars. So you can do it. Again, there's that record of my eighth great-great-grandparents. Use all sorts of different resources. Again, you do your work on this side of the pond first, then you do your work on that side as well. You study the time and location, the history, so you can find what records might be available, where and when are they available, in what form might they be, how might the names have been spelled, when may they have changed their names. You get the little hints. Over here, they underlined the surnames. There's Meisner, there's Hans Meisner, and there's Susanna Mullerund. They would add a little in on the end if it was a woman's name. She was not Mullerin. That's just showing she's a woman. They're in Obereuerheim. And the one uh, witness was Hans Schramm. Well, they put a B on the end back then if the word ended in an M. So you need to pay attention to those. But you can do it. I encourage you to do it. It's getting easier. Some of the records are online, but you can get lots of help, and there are lots of resources as well. So it depends. And again, we have coming up now, you've got your discount, right? Save $15 what you paid for the access here. For Michael's presentation, this is what he's going to be talking about. This has been recorded, so you'll have access to these records, the presentations for up till March 28th. And then they have the syllabus with all those resources as well to keep you busy and review what you've heard today. And again, we have our German Genealogy SIG. We have the Dallas Genealogical Society. We hope you will consider joining with them. And again, this is the link to the seminar. So with that, do we have any questions?
Yes, we have a few questions.
Great.
Let's see. So there's three major questions. Okay, the first one is, where would I search for a German Poland records for great-grandfather born in 1859? All we know is a mention of a hometown, not sure of the spelling, Charkov or maybe Charsnow. I found a place, Brizen Kreis Charsnow, Posen, in Germany, Poland. Thank you for your thoughts.
Okay, sure. So that's the point where it had already been divvied up from the 1770s into that was part of the German area. Were they German? Were they Polish? Sounds like they were German. Again, the records would have been local. That was before civil registrations of those records. None of them would have been pulled back into Berlin. But again, I would look like at Kartenmeister in particular to look at sort of the names of the towns. Again, look at some of those alternate names. Also, again, look at Kartenmeister, look at the Wikipedias on Compkin, look at the Family Search Wiki as well. And learn about that locality and then see if it can sort you down to where you might find a church record. So those would be places for you to start to zoom in. And then again, you can use those gazetteers to figure out where the church may have been. And then that allows you to start doing some search on where might the records have been. Did they survive? And again, archivists work very hard to save records. You know, if you go to the big cathedral in Cologne, you see all the very old stained glass windows. How did they survive the war? Because they took them all out of the church and buried them and hid them. And then after the church was bombed and after the war, they came back and put them back up. They did the same sort of thing with a lot of the archive records. They took them away and tried to save them wherever they could. So there's a good chance that even after the wars, even after some fires, the records may still be there somewhere.
Okay, I want to mention that I did add a link in the chat with some, just like a general list of Polish websites. Okay, number two, if someone was born in a place which was Prussia when they were born and then became Germany and today is now Poland, where do you look for records say a birth from a time it was Prussia, would these records most likely be local and in today's Poland?
Okay, the first place to start would, yeah, I'll most likely look locally in Poland for those records. Now, you say when it was Prussia, were these the civil registrations from 1876 or before that? If they were the German civil registrations from 1876, those got pulled back in 1945 to Berlin. But otherwise, in most cases, they're going to be there in Poland, in that locality. The records may be in German at that point, written in German, but they would most likely still be at that locality, either in the actual village or maybe, depending on how old the records were, maybe they got moved into a little more centralized archive.
So
But
that
most
was,
likely they're there.
yeah, that was my question. And the birth was in the 1830s.
Okay, so they'll be in Poland.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, the next question. If I think you partially answered this after they asked the question, if children were born before the parents married, would both parents be listed? This was when you're talking about baptism, I believe. Would they be recorded in the church records, and which churches would allow children to be listed?
Okay, everybody got baptized. It didn't matter legitimate, illegitimate, or whatever. You had to get baptized because you wanted to get to heaven, right? And your parents wanted to get to heaven. In some cases, the same day they were born, they took them to the church. That was Bernard. He was born in the morning and baptized in the afternoon. So everybody would be baptized. If they were illegitimate, that means they didn't have the name of the father. It would not have been listed. They may have written the name upside down. They may have made some sort of notification or whatever. And again, they may not have been married just because they didn't get permission to get married. And when they did eventually get married, then they became legitimate. Now, I mentioned those marriage restriction laws. Prussia was a little bit more liberal. So as you got into about the 1840s, 1850s, then you would have legitimate births and you could get married. In Bavaria, it was really the 1860s. But then at that point, all the couples that wanted to get married and weren't given permission to get married got married. So you may find your relatives getting married in particularly southern Germany in the late 1860s, 1870s, because then they finally were allowed to get married. They'd been having kids all along. The kids were now legitimate, but you want to look the church records, that the baptismal records will be there as illegitimate kids, often listed with just the name of the mother. But if they're born, they got baptized. And if it was after civil registration, then yes, your birth was registered. But everybody got baptized, legitimate or not. Uh, and you would have the record in the church for that, maybe with some notations and even things like they write it upside down or whatever. But yes, you got baptized. It wasn't your fault you were illegitimate in the eyes of the church. Could you become a member of the guild? No. Could you become a member of the town? No. But then if your parents eventually were able to get married, then you became legitimate.
And sometimes they did mention the name of the father if he admitted that he was the father. I've seen that as well. Yeah.
Yeah, in particularly Prussia, you could come back and sign an affidavit, yes, I'm the father. And even if you weren't allowed to get married yet, then you would be on record.
I've got a related question, so I'm going to jump to it real quick. Is it true that the mother often did not attend, the baptism, but the midwife frequently was present?
Only if the mother physically couldn't get there. Like I say, in a number of cases, she would be there. Uh, she would be documented as being the mother. You would have the baptismal sponsors physically there, often friends, neighbors, relatives. You want to pay attention to them as you're doing your research. For the civil registration, you didn't have to bring the kid. So you saw that one case, the midwife just came and said, yes, the maid gave birth to this little girl. So somebody just had to be there to attest to it. Obviously, the child had to be there to be baptized, but the mother, officially by the church, didn't have to be, but most likely, unless she really physically couldn't go, she would have been there because that was an extremely important thing for the family. That's the cultural part of it.
Okay, thank you. The next question. If my ancestor left Germany from Amsterdam in 1803, is there a particular region in Germany he might have come to?
Okay, yeah,
Left from,
usually you would come down the river. So if you came to Amsterdam, often you came down the river, the Rhine River in particular. They would come to Amsterdam, depending on the time. That was a little later than the 1790s. A lot of them were coming over into England and sort of camped out outside of London and then moved them over into Liverpool and then either went to Ireland or Canada or the US. But mostly that's where they would have come from. The passenger lists on this side really weren't mandated until 1820 in the United States. But again, we talked earlier, if you were coming, now this was the United States. The very early records, if they were not subjects of the King of England in the 1700s before the Revolutionary War, in those cases, they had to swear allegiance to the king. You didn't really have to swear allegiance to the president of the United States or anything. You just sort of came in and got off the ship and went from there. And you have to be careful in some cases if they left from Amsterdam and they asked them when they came in the United States, where'd you come from? They said, well, we came from Amsterdam. But that was not the town they came from. That's just where they left from. So again,
okay,
do all
thank
your
you.
research on this end. Again, look for baptismal records where they may have asked the parents, where did you come from? Those family histories, the death certificates, the like.
Okay, and we had some questions about the recordings. So the recordings for this presentation will be available, and I think Tony, you have we posted the link a while ago, but it's also in the email that you received. It's in the syllabus, I believe, as well, where the recording will be. Also, the Dallas Society's German Interest Group, their recordings are available, and I'll put the website in chat. And I don't know if there's any other clarification there, Tony.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
that for us is in the syllabus as well, the Dallas Genealogy SIG, and a couple other presentations you might be interested in. And Tony, I'll let you talk about the link to the syllabus and the recordings.
yeah, so the question was about the recordings for this event, and you need to register and pay the $15 fee to access the recordings for this event. Seminar events, same thing. You need to register and pay for the seminar to have the access to the recordings for that. For the most part, all of the other recordings we have, all of the German group presentations are available to anybody. The monthly meetings, some speakers ask us to put them behind a paywall and only make them available to members. Some speakers ask us to limit it for certain amounts of time. So it's really kind of at the discretion of the speaker, and we do whatever they ask. So as Bernard said, it depends.
But
And we'll lay a guilt trip on you to join the society.
That too.
I think we had one other question too. Is it true, back to your presentation, Bernard, is it true that the mother often did not attend the baptism, but the midwife frequently was present?
Oh, we sort of
Did you
answered
answer that one?
For the civil registration, someone, the father, the midwife would come to register the child. That would be when they were doing the civil registrations. For the baptism, that was so important that unless the mother was really, really physically unable to do it, in most cases, you just sort of gave birth and then got up and made dinner kind of thing.
Yeah.
More power to
They were
you
tough
women
back then.
that, even now today, I knew one case where she gave birth and then went to the mall. But baptism was so important that the mother most likely to be there. But again, all the record said was who was baptized, who was the mother, who was the father, who were the godparents. So the mother didn't have to be there to be physically document it as such. Obviously, the godparents did because they said we stand in. But I would bet you almost every single case the mother was there at the baptism.
I see. Okay. And Tony, did you answer that question that Deborah had about the password for the recordings because it
Yeah.
was not in the syllabus?
Yeah, the password is just essentials, and I just put a link in there. They should
Oh,
all be
I
in the
see.
confirmation information, but so that recordings page is where the links to these recordings are going to be no later than tomorrow, and a great deal of other information too.
Yeah. And as has been said a couple of times, these recordings for this particular presentation will be up and available to people who've registered up until the 28th of March when Michael Lockapo will be presenting to us. So it's a great
And just
opportunity to review this in advance. Yep.
and shameless, self-promotion too. The registration is also going to be available until that date. So if you have anybody you know who would benefit from this, they can come and register and watch the presentations anytime between now and then as well.
Great point. Great point.
Is there a discount code that you mentioned for Lockapo's registration? Do you want to explain that?
I want
Do
to
you know how
remember
that
what it
one
is
works?
too. So yeah, because what we'll offer, just as soon as I remember what the discount code is, when you register for the Mike Lockapo seminar, if you choose to attend that, I'll give you the discount code in just a moment, and that will take the $15 you've paid for this off from the cost of that. So it's not quite a discount since you've already paid it, but you will pay a reduced price to attend that seminar.
Right.
Give me 1 second to find that code for you.
Also, there are some differences in registering earlier for the seminar, the spring seminar and other seasonal seminars we have, quarterly seminars. So be sure that you register by the early date so that you can get the best pricing.
I think that's March 8th.
Discount or not. March 8th? Okay.
I think that's it.
Yeah,
And
so
if
the
you're a
registration,
member, you get a discount.
Yes.
yes, the registration discount code, which everybody gets, the $15 discount is GGE. It is case sensitive, so it's an uppercase G, uppercase G, uppercase E.
For
And it's
German genealogical or German genealogy essentials, right?
you are quick. When you go to the seminar registration page, that discount code box is very faint, so squint a bit, but it is there.
Okay. Any other questions for Bernard or for Barbara? Anything? Well, if not, I want to thank everybody for joining us. It was a great opportunity to meet online with all this bad weather we're enduring. And Bernard, Barbara, both of you were just outstanding. I really enjoyed this seminar. So thank you so much. And I think it gives us a great, lead into the March seminar that's coming up. And we hope to see everybody there, and tell your friends. And we'll talk later.
This has been a production of the Dallas Genealogical Society. If you're already a member, thank you. Your fees have been supporting these and other society activities. If you're not yet a member, please consider joining now. Go to dallasgenealogy.org and click on the membership tab.